The river ran quiet that evening, the kind of hush that made a man feel like the whole world had paused its breathing. Alaric bent beside his gelding's flank, letting the canteen fill slowly as the water curled around rocks smooth as prayer stones. The gelding, a roan named Valor, flicked his ears toward the fading sun but stood still. They were alike, man and beast, silent, worn, and long past expecting anything new. The road had become his habit. He never stayed too long anywhere. Not because he feared people, but because people left, and he'd learned early how to leave first. He reached for the saddlebag, fishing out a piece of jerky, when something in the air shifted. A prickle, a sense. Valor lifted his head, nostrils flaring, ears alert. Alaric froze, one hand on the saddle horn. The whisper came soft, like reeds rustling. But it wasn't wind. "Sir, please." He turned. A girl stood half-hidden behind the willow that leaned over the riverbank, her bare feet sunk in the wet mud, her dress clinging damp to her thin frame. She looked no older than 6. Her dark hair was tangled, and her cheeks were streaked with both dirt and tears, though it seemed she'd run out of energy to shed any more. He rose slowly, hands visible. She didn't flinch. Her voice came again, rasped from somewhere between fear and exhaustion. "They tied my mama up, by the river. They're gonna kill her tonight." Alaric didn't ask who. Didn't press for details. He just walked to her like he was stepping through a dream. Kneeling, he studied her. Not just the grime on her skin or the tremble in her knees, but the clarity in her eyes. Children didn't lie like that. Not with fear sharp as flint behind their pupils. She blinked at him, swallowed, and collapsed into his arms. He caught her like she was made of snow, light and fragile and liable to vanish if held too tightly. She didn't speak again, not even when he lifted her into the saddle. He mounted behind her and nudged Valor with his heel. She pointed with a weak hand. South. Along the water's bend. And so they rode. The trail narrowed, winding between boulders and brush that clawed like fingers. The sun fell fast, shadows stretching long and blue across the ground. Alaric could feel the girl's ribs beneath his arm, her breathing shallow and rhythmic. She was fading. He gave her his coat, pulling it over her like a cocoon. She whispered once, barely above a breath. "Her name's Vera, my mama." They crossed a fallen log, splashed through shallow reeds. Up ahead, through the split in the trees, firelight flickered. He dismounted quietly, tying Valor in the shadows. The girl stirred as he lifted her down, but didn't resist. She clung to his neck, breath warm against his collarbone. He found a spot under a cedar, tucking her beneath its sheltering boughs, pressing his canteen to her lips. She drank like a sparrow, quick and careful. He touched her chin. "Stay here. No matter what you hear." She nodded once. Eyes like dusk, wide and haunted. Then he rose, the rifle slung across his back. His boots made no sound on the mossy ground as he moved. Alaric wasn't the sort of man who sought violence, but he'd seen enough to know when it was needed. And this had the scent of something cruel. The fires burned low by the river's edge, casting strange shadows that danced on the rock walls. He crept closer, pausing behind a thick stand of cattails. 2 men sat near the flame, one older, thick-necked, with a half-empty bottle swinging from his hand. The other was wiry, twitchy, eyes darting even in half-sleep. Their coats were slung over a fallen tree, and from the way they sprawled, they'd been drinking for hours. But it was what lay between them that made Alaric's breath still. A woman, bound at the wrists and ankles, slumped against a stake driven into the sand. Her head hung forward, hair obscuring her face. She wasn't moving. For a sickening moment, he thought he was too late. Then her fingers twitched. Relief cut through him, sharp and fast. He studied the terrain. No easy way in without drawing attention. He'd need distraction. Time. He took out the knife from his boot and crept toward the edge of the camp, ducking behind a cluster of river stones. A rustle to his left made one of the men stir, but he only cursed and rolled over. Closer now, he could hear the girl breathing. Could see the slow rise of her chest. Her dress was torn at the sleeve, knees scraped raw. But her face, when he finally saw it, was calm. Not peaceful. Just resigned. Like a woman who'd stopped waiting for mercy and simply accepted the dirt. Alaric's throat tightened. He moved behind the stake, crouching low, and set the knife to the rope. The fibers were thick, coarse. It would take time. His hand worked fast, deliberate. The woman didn't flinch until the last thread gave way, and the pressure eased on her limbs. She looked up. Their eyes met. And something passed between them. Not relief, not fear. Recognition. He didn't know her, not in memory. But he knew what it looked like when a soul saw something it never thought would come. Help. She whispered one word. Why? He pressed a finger to his lips. Behind them, a bottle shattered. The drunk had dropped it. The other man jerked upright. Alaric stood, catching Vera as she staggered, slinging her over one shoulder like she weighed no more than the breeze. Her gasp was muffled in his shirt. He ran. Quiet, swift. Gunfire cracked behind them, but missed. Bullets didn't have eyes, and darkness was on Alaric's side. He reached the cedar. The girl was still there, crouched with his coat pulled up to her chin. Vera moaned softly as he set her down, wincing at her wrists. The girl launched forward, hugging her mother so hard it made them both cry out. Alaric crouched beside them, checking for wounds. Nothing broken. Bruises, cuts, exhaustion. Vera tried to speak again. Her lips quivered. He stopped her with a shake of his head. "You're safe now," he said softly. And for the first time, Vera wept. Not the loud, broken sobs of panic, but the quiet, aching tears of a woman who hadn't been allowed to fall apart until now. He wrapped the blanket from his saddle around her shoulders, then added a second for the child. The three of them huddled together beneath the cedar, as the river whispered nearby, and the firelight from down the trail slowly died. Alaric leaned back against the tree, cradling the rifle across his lap. The girl, Hallie, she'd said, fell asleep mid-sob, her hand curled in Vera's dress. Vera, eyes rimmed red, looked over at him through the dark. Her voice came low, almost a whisper. "I thought no one would come." He stared into the night. "My mother waited too," he said. "No one ever came for her." Silence settled over them like a second blanket. The river kept flowing. The moon lifted slow and silver behind the trees. Alaric sat watch beside the two souls fate had dropped in his path like a test. He didn't know what came next. But tonight, he'd chosen not to look away. Dawn rose slow and pale, as if it too had been up all night holding its breath. Alaric stirred first. He hadn't truly slept. His back ached from leaning against the cedar, but he didn't shift. His eyes had stayed on the narrow trail the whole night, listening for footsteps, for the clink of a spur, the crack of a twig. Nothing came. Just the wind, soft and unsettled. Beside him, Vera lay curled around her daughter, still in the same crumpled dress from the night before. Hallie stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and Vera blinked awake. Her hand instinctively reached for her daughter's forehead. A mother's first motion. Alaric watched quietly. She looked at him after a long moment, her voice dry as old pine. "Are you going to ask?" He shook his head. "Why not? I already heard what matters." Vera sat up slow, careful not to jostle Hallie. Her bones cracked softly. "I don't even know your name." "Alaric." She said it like tasting something unfamiliar. "And you just help strangers?" He glanced at the rising sun, rubbing a hand across his jaw. No. Not usually. The quiet stretched again, but this time it wasn't brittle. It just hung there, worn like a well-used coat, until she tucked her legs beneath her and whispered, "They're going to come after us. If not those two, then someone meaner. Word travels." "I know," he said. "What do we do?" "We leave." She stared at him, uncertain. "Where?" "My place. It's quiet. A day's ride west." "You live alone?" Alaric didn't answer. Instead he rose, dusted off his coat, and went to fetch Valor. Vera watched him, arms still around her girl, and something in her expression softened. Not with trust, but with tired resolve. The kind you get after running out of any other choice. By noon, they were on the move. Alaric rode with Hallie in front, Vera behind him. Her hands hesitated before resting on his hips, and even then she barely touched him, like contact still meant consequence. Her body was stiff, breath careful. But her eyes stayed wide and watching, scanning the horizon as if expecting vengeance to come galloping over every hill. The ride was long, the road narrow and winding, mostly animal tracks through pine and dust. Alaric didn't speak unless necessary. He watched the tree lines, the gullies, the bend of shadows. His rifle stayed within reach. They stopped once, to water the horse and eat jerky and biscuits from a wax pouch. Vera wouldn't take more than half of what he offered. Hallie fell asleep again not long after, head against Alaric's chest, mouth open in the way children always sleep, like they've been granted a peace the world never keeps. When they reached his homestead, the light was already fading. The cabin sat low in a meadow ringed by tall firs, near a slope that ended in a stream. Modest, one room and a loft, but strong. Built by his hands. He'd planted a line of sunflowers once, back when he still believed things might grow. Vera looked at it like she was staring at something too kind to be trusted. "You can stay," Alaric said quietly, dismounting. "For how long?" "Long as you need." Her mouth opened. Closed. She didn't argue. Inside, the air smelled of pine sap and wood smoke. He showed her the bed. She stared at it like it was a church altar. Then she eased Hallie down gently, and took a seat on the floor beside her. Alaric brought a basin of warm water, and set it before her without a word. She looked up. Her lips twitched, just a little. "I don't know what to make of you." He shrugged. "Don't try too hard." That night, he slept in the loft. Left them the whole cabin floor. Lay awake staring through the slats in the roof, listening to the fire crackle, to Hallie's soft snore, and to the shifting weight of Vera's thoughts as she sat by the hearth long after the flames died down. The next few days passed quiet. Alaric worked the land like usual, except now there was coffee already brewed when he came back from chopping wood. Hallie followed him sometimes, dragging a stick and making little stories in the dirt. Vera swept, cleaned, mended a worn shirt of his without asking. He didn't tell her how long it had been since someone tended to him, without taking something in return. They didn't talk much, but small things were shared, in glances, gestures, the way her eyes followed him when she thought he wasn't looking. One morning, he found her outside in a threadbare shawl, hanging clothes on a makeshift line. Her hands trembled slightly in the cold. He stepped closer, took the clothespin from her fingers, and hung the dress himself. She didn't stop him. "They'll come looking," she said finally. He nodded. "My cousin, he has men. Friends in ugly places." Alaric didn't answer. Just met her gaze and held it. She took a shaky breath. "I don't want to run anymore." "You won't." It was a promise. Not loud, not grand. But Vera's shoulders sagged a little like she'd exhaled something she hadn't realized she'd been holding. That night, thunder rolled in. The sky turned black, wind lashing the trees. Hallie cried out in her sleep. Vera bolted upright, breath ragged. Alaric came down the ladder with a blanket and a lamp. "It's just a storm." "I know," she said. But her hands were clenched into fists. He sat beside her on the floor, watching the firelight flicker on her face. For a long time, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "Do you think I'm weak?" He turned to her. "No. My fiancé said I was. Said no man wants a woman who's been passed from house to house, with no name left." Alaric looked at her, really looked. At the bruises fading on her arms. At the stubborn pride in her chin. At the fact that even broken, she still fought to shield her child from the world's teeth. "I think you're one of the strongest people I've ever seen," he said. She covered her mouth like she might break open. "I didn't mean for you to save us. You didn't ask. I was ashamed. There's nothing shameful in surviving." The storm growled outside, but inside it was still. Vera reached forward without thinking and touched his hand, lightly, as if afraid he'd pull away. He didn't. "I don't know how to repay you," she whispered. "You don't owe me. But people always expect something. I don't." She stared into his face like trying to read something in a language she'd long forgotten. Something gentle. Something steady. They sat there, hand to hand, while the storm screamed and wept outside the walls. And when the thunder finally softened into a whisper, Vera leaned her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes. He didn't move. Didn't breathe too loud. Just let her be. Outside, the world was wild and angry. But inside that little cabin, for the first time in a long, long while, it felt like something good was beginning. Neither of them said it aloud. Summer came early that year. Alaric never spoke of it aloud, but he felt the change as surely as a man feels the turning of the tide. His mornings no longer began with emptiness. He'd wake before the light and listen to the sounds of breath, hers and Hallie's, as if they were his own heartbeat. Vera had begun humming again, softly when she thought no one listened. Sometimes he caught her smiling at nothing, stirring stew or sewing patches. Not the smile of a woman putting on a mask, but the kind that blooms quietly from being safe. He still chopped wood. Still hunted. Still rode out to check his traps. But he found himself lingering on the porch longer, bringing back little things for Hallie. Smooth stones, feathers, wild berries cupped in his palms. When he sat in the doorway at dusk, carving small animals from driftwood, Hallie would crawl into his lap without asking, her tiny fingers tracing the lines of his face like she was learning them by memory. But Vera, she stayed just beyond the edge of reach. She was kind, grateful, soft-spoken, but careful, like a deer stepping through snow, listening for the snap of a branch that meant danger. She didn't speak of the past unless it spilled out sideways, in half-sentences, in the way her body stiffened when thunder rolled, or when strangers passed on the trail and she stepped behind Alaric without thinking. One morning, Alaric found her kneeling beside the spring, scrubbing their clothes. Her sleeves were rolled up, her skirt damp to the knees, and sunlight kissed her hair to a burnished bronze. She looked strong. Not in the way men often described it, but in the quiet, enduring way of something that's bent without breaking. "You don't have to do all that," he said from the slope above. She didn't look up. "I know." He came closer, crouched beside her. "You could rest." "I rest enough." "You've been carrying weight for too long." She stopped scrubbing and stared at the sky. "I wouldn't know who I was without it." He sat beside her, their knees almost touching. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the birds and the distant trickle of water filled the silence. Then Vera said, voice thin as mist, "I don't want to be afraid forever." He nodded. "But I don't know how to stop waiting for something bad to happen." "You don't stop," Alaric said. "You just choose not to run when it does." She looked at him. What if it costs me everything again? Then you'll still be braver than most. That afternoon, a wagon rattled past the tree line, too close for comfort. Alaric stepped out with his rifle slung across his shoulder, casual but ready. The driver didn't stop, didn't glance their way. But Vera watched the dust cloud long after it vanished, her hands gripping the porch rail like it was the only solid thing in the world. That night, she couldn't sleep. Alaric heard the floor creak and found her sitting outside, wrapped in her shawl, staring up at the stars. He brought her coffee. She didn't drink it, just held the cup for warmth. "Do you think people can start over?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. She turned toward him. "I'm not talking about land or names. I mean really start over. From inside." He looked at her, eyes shadowed in the firelight. "I think starting over means trusting that you still matter, even after what's been taken from you." Vera's voice caught. "I want to believe that." "Then let yourself." Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with the ache of wanting to believe in something soft again. The next morning, Alaric rode into town. Supplies had dwindled. He told her he'd be back by sundown. She gave him a nod, but her grip on the porch rail didn't loosen until he disappeared into the trees. Town was like it always was, dusty, restless, loud. Alaric kept to himself. Bought flour, coffee, nails. Traded a pelt for medicine. But as he passed the saloon, he heard something that made his feet stop mid-step. A voice. Loud. Ugly. Familiar. Bet she's hiding somewhere. She always was good at crawling under rocks. Alaric turned. There stood Vera's cousin, flanked by two other men, mouths full of liquor and pride, talking about her like she was some lost cow to be dragged home and branded, laughing like they'd earned the right to name her suffering. Alaric didn't speak, didn't step forward. He simply walked past them, quiet and steady. But inside, something cold had settled. When he returned, Vera was waiting on the porch. "You saw someone," she said, reading it in his face. "I did." "They're close?" "Not yet. But they will be." Her jaw tightened. "Then I should go." He stepped forward. "No. I won't bring trouble to your door." "You already did," he said. "And I opened it. You think I'd close it now?" Her voice broke. "I don't want to be the reason you get hurt." "I'm not afraid of getting hurt." She shook her head. "But I am." He took her hand. She tried to pull away. He didn't let her. "You're not alone anymore," he said. Vera looked at him like he'd just handed her something precious and heavy. "I don't know what to do with this," she whispered. "Then let it sit," he said. "It'll show you when it's ready." That evening, Hallie came into the room with her hands full of wildflowers and a question in her eyes. "Mama, can I call him Papa?" Vera froze. Alaric stopped carving. The girl's voice was small but steady. "He takes care of us. Like a papa would." Vera swallowed hard. "Only if he says yes." Alaric met the little girl's gaze. "I'd be proud if you did," he said. Hallie smiled and ran off to put the flowers in a jar. Vera sat down slow, her face pale, her breath unsteady. "She's always wanted to belong somewhere," she said. "So have I," Alaric murmured. She looked at him, and something unspoken passed between them, raw and real. "I'm scared," she said. He stepped closer. "So am I. But I still want to try." He nodded. "Then let's." Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled. And closer, at the edge of the forest, a twig snapped beneath a boot. Vera didn't hear it. But Alaric did. His hand reached for the rifle. He looked at her one more time. Stay inside. Lock the door. She went pale. Alaric. I'll be back. He stepped into the dark, his figure swallowed by pine shadows and moonlight. And behind the locked door, Vera stood with her daughter pressed close, whispering prayers not of fear, but of hope. Because this time, she wasn't alone. And this time, someone had chosen to stay. The trees were silent that night. Alaric moved through them like smoke, his rifle steady in his hands, his breath calm but taut. Every few paces he paused, listening. He had grown up learning not to trust what he saw first. It was the quiet that warned you, the absence of birdsong, the wrong rhythm of footsteps on pine. Then he saw the shape. A figure crouched near the edge of the clearing, watching the cabin. Another man leaned against a tree nearby, chewing something and spitting into the dirt. A third sat just out of reach of the moonlight, back to a stump, cleaning his nails with the tip of a knife. Alaric recognized the cousin first. The sneer hadn't changed. That arrogant tilt of the chin, as if the world owed him something, and he was owed double. The others were different, broader, meaner. Hired, probably. Drunk or half-dry. Dangerous either way. Alaric moved left, circling wide through the brush, slow as a river in winter. He stepped where the ground told him to, where it wouldn't betray him with a snap or shift. He came up behind the third man first, the one with the knife, and pressed the rifle muzzle into the back of his neck, before he could so much as twitch. "Don't move," Alaric said quietly. The man froze. Alaric took the knife from his hand, flipped it into the leaves. Then he whistled, sharp and low. It was a signal Vera knew. She heard it through the cabin walls and pulled Hallie into her arms, moving them into the root cellar beneath the hearth as they practiced. Quiet. Careful. She lowered the trapdoor and drew the bolt. Outside, the cousin cursed and reached for his pistol. Alaric dropped the man at his feet with the butt of the rifle, and stepped into the clearing, dead center between torchlight and moonshadow. "Drop it," Alaric said. The cousin froze. "You." "That's right. You've got no idea what she's done." "I know enough," Alaric said. "I know she was tied like livestock by her own blood. I know she's got more spine than you ever did. And I know if you take one step toward my home again, you won't walk back from it." The other man, the one against the tree, shifted. Alaric's rifle turned before the man's hand found the trigger. "Don't." "I ain't got a quarrel," the man said, hands raised. "Just coin. Then take what honor you've got left and walk." A long silence. Then the man nodded, backed away, muttering something about fools and stubborn women. The cousin didn't follow. He spat, red with hate. "You think you saved her? She'll use you up. They all do." Alaric's gaze didn't falter. "I've been alone a long time. She's the first thing that made me want to stay. You'll regret it. I already regret not stepping in sooner." With that he raised the rifle, not to fire, but to make clear he wouldn't hesitate. The cousin backed down, jaw clenched, hatred burning in his eyes like a fever. They disappeared into the trees, curses trailing like ash. Alaric stood still for another 5 minutes, rifle in hand, waiting for the wind to shift, for any last fool to come back swinging. None did. Only then did he exhale and lower his gun. He returned to the cabin with slow steps, dirt and blood on his coat, sweat on his brow, but nothing broken that hadn't already been broken long ago. He knocked twice on the hearthstone. The trapdoor creaked open. Vera emerged with Hallie clutched tight to her chest. Her eyes darted past him, scanning the dark. "They're gone," Alaric said. "You're not hurt." "No." She reached for his hand without thinking and touched it, palm to palm. Her fingers trembled. His didn't. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would." She looked at him, really looked. Not just at the man who'd carried her from that riverside stake, not the man who fed her child, or carved her name into the rhythm of his days, but the man who chose her even when trouble came knocking. "Why?" she asked, voice cracking like brittle paper. "Because no one ever came back for my mother," he said. "And I swore if I ever could, I'd be the one who did." Tears filled her eyes then, fast and full, the kind that don't wait for permission. She tried to turn away, but he caught her chin, gentle as the wind, and lifted it. "I want you here," he said. "Not because you need saving, but because you've saved me too, in ways I don't have words for." She didn't speak. She just fell into his arms and cried. All the years of silence, of being overlooked, abandoned, blamed, wrapped in that single sob that shook her shoulders like rain on a dry field. He held her like she was sacred. The next morning dawned slow and golden, honeyed with the hush of relief. Vera stood barefoot on the porch, dress hem catching dew, watching the chickens scratch lazily at the dirt. Hallie braided wildflowers into a circle nearby, humming something tuneless but happy. Alaric stepped out beside them, still toweling his hair from the basin. "You sleep?" he asked. She nodded. "Deepest in years." He looked at the horizon, thoughtful. Then at her. "I want to ask you something." She tilted her head, curious. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small carved ring, made of whittled birchwood, smooth and simple. "Not much, but made with care." "I didn't plan to say this here, not like this," he murmured. "But when life gives you peace, even in scraps, you don't wait." He knelt, slow and steady, and held the ring up. "I'd like to marry you, Vera. If you'll have a man like me." Her breath caught sharp in her throat. Hallie looked up, clutching her daisy chain. Vera didn't answer right away. She covered her mouth, eyes wide. Her knees gave, and she dropped to the porch beside him, hands trembling. "I'm not crying because I'm scared," she whispered. "I'm crying because no one's ever asked me anything that gently." Alaric took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. "I'll never ask you to be anyone but yourself," he said. She leaned forward, forehead against his, voice shaking. "Yes." Hallie squealed and ran in circles, flowers flying. Later that week, they stood beneath the cottonwood tree near the river where they'd first met. Not where she'd been tied, but farther upstream, where the water moved clearer, kinder. Just the preacher, the wind, and the song of birds. Vera wore a dress she'd sewn herself, simple linen cinched at the waist. Her hair was loose, curling in the sun. Hallie wore a crown of blooms and carried 2 pine cones tied with string, the wedding bells, she called them. When Alaric said the words, "Home is wherever your breath is," Vera cried again. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the beautiful, aching knowledge that she'd been chosen fully, completely, without needing to prove a thing. Vera watched him from the doorway, her ring catching firelight, her soul full. No one had saved her. They had saved each other. And in a world that had once tied her down, she now stood, free, loved, seen. And it was peace.